Presbyterian Manse, the Greenwood Cemetery Chapel, the building site for the old Reedsburg Hospital, and Nishan Park are here because of the generosity of one family. This is their story. David Rudd. David Rudd and his family moved to the Reedsburg area in 1851, 5 years before the village was incorporated. They came from Massachusetts by way of Willoughby, Ohio. David, 30 years old, along with his younger siblings, brothers Eli and Sheldon, and their sister Sarah, settled on a farm along with their parents. David and Eli struck off on their own and formed a partnership called Rudd and Company. They started farming, and one of their first endeavors was in growing hops. Hops roots were recently introduced to the Reedsburg area, and Rudd and Company quickly prospered with their crop. Their fortunes soared even higher after the New York crop failed due to disease and the hop aphid. The hop market crashed in 1868, wiping out many small fortunes. Rudd and Company was not one of them. The year before, 1867, sensing the upcoming downturn in the hops market, Rudd and Company made two very wise moves. The first was to establish the Reedsburg Bank along with Joseph Mackey. The second was to buy over 1,400 acres of forest in Monroe County near Warrens, Wisconsin. When they moved north to Monroe County, they did so in a big way. They started their own town, and they named it Rudd's Mills. They had their own post office, and they were located on the rail line that is now known as the 400 Trail. Several people from Reedsburg followed Rudd and Company to their new town and worked there for the next 14 years. They did their part to fulfill the increasing demand for lumber as this part of the state realized tremendous growth. At the end of 14 years, they quit. In 1862, when he was 61 years old, David Rudd moved back to Reedsburg and stepped back into the role as president of the bank he helped establish, the Reedsburg Bank. The bank building had been rebuilt following the devastating fire of 1877 that burned down the entire block. Rudd remodeled the second floor as his residence and lived there by himself for the next 2 years. Mary Meyers. Mary Meyers moved to Reedsburg in 1855, 4 years after the Rudds arrived. Mary was only 7 years old at the time. Her family came from Janesville, where her father was a cabinet maker. He opened a furniture store on Main Street, and Mary and her two sisters grew up in Reedsburg. 9 years after opening the store, Mary's mother died. Over the course of the next 20 years, Mary helped her father at the store and then took care of him when his health failed. After her father died, Mary was alone, but not for long. In 1884, at the age of 36, Mary and David Rudd, who was now 63 years old, got married. She moved in above the bank with her new husband, and for the next 7 years, it was just the two of them. During that time, David continued to expand his empire. The Reedsburg Woolen Mills had been started in 1884, but after 2 years it was floundering and on the verge of going out of business. David, along with two partners, bought the factory and turned it into a profitable enterprise that continued to flourish for the next 81 years until 1967. It was the largest employer in Reedsburg for many years. Frida Meyers. In 1891, David and Mary Rudd added another member to their family when Mary's 13-year-old niece Frida came to live with them. Frida had been born in New London, Wisconsin, to Mary's younger sister Clara. Clara and her husband parted and all agreed it was in Frida's best interest to move to Reedsburg with her Aunt Mary. Frida settled into her new life with her aunt and uncle. She quickly made new friends and spent much of the summers at their large cottage on Devil's Lake in Baraboo. The three of them also traveled extensively throughout the country, spending much time in California, where Mary's sisters had relocated. 5 years later, everything changed dramatically when David died. It was while the family was on vacation in Jacksonville, Florida, that David suffered a fatal heart attack. He was 75 years old. After he died, Mary bought the house on the corner of Vine and 2nd Street, where she and Frida made their new home. Mary remained active in the affairs at the Reedsburg Bank and formed a business alliance with the new bank president, attorney Ralph Perry. Mary was able to substantially increase her personal wealth with his help. Frida also remained in Reedsburg with Mary. Like Mary, she developed a strong sense of compassion and volunteered in a wide variety of local efforts to help those who were in need. They were also widely traveled, visiting many parts of the world, which included spending time in California with Mary's sisters. They had a great life together. Mary was in Los Angeles when she died on February 2, 1924, at the age of 76. She was brought back to Reedsburg and laid to rest next to her husband. Mary's estate was left to Frida. It was the largest estate ever probated in Sauk County, worth over $550,000. If Frida had not survived Mary, the bulk of her estate went to the citizens of Reedsburg in various gifts and trust funds. Edward Nishan. Edward was an Armenian who left his home in Istanbul, Turkey, when the Ottoman Empire began an ethnic cleansing targeting Armenians. Over 1.5 million Armenians were exterminated during the next 10 years. Edward moved to New York City and was working at the Friars Club when he and Frida met. Rumor has it that they met at a Broadway play when Edward sat in an empty seat next to Frida. They married in 1928 when Frida was 50 years old and Edward was 48. They made their home in the house on Vine Street in Reedsburg. Frida began to display more of her generosity to the local citizens. She built the manse for the Presbyterian Church and provided a trust fund for its upkeep. As a member of the hospital board, she bought and then donated the land for construction of the new hospital on Park Street. She also set up a trust fund for the building's upkeep. Mary had made provisions for similar donations in her will that would have been distributed in the event Frida died before Mary. Frida chose to extend a similar philosophy of generosity towards the citizens of Reedsburg. Frida and Edward were only married a little over 10 years before Frida developed cancer. Frida died June 1, 1938. Thanks to her continued association with Reedsburg Bank President Ralph Perry, Frida's estate grew to nearly $800,000. Of that amount, Frida gave away $297,000 to the citizens of Reedsburg. One of the first projects was the construction of the Frida Meyers Nishan Memorial Chapel, located in Greenwood Cemetery. Now a widower, Edward spent the next 36 years splitting his time between Reedsburg and Tucson, Arizona, where he would spend the winters. He made several donations to the fire department, the Presbyterian Church, and the hospital during that time. He had a passion for roses, and in 1953, the first time the Miss Wisconsin pageant was held in Reedsburg, the contestants posed for pictures in his garden. He never remarried, and when he died in 1975, at the age of 95, he left the city of Reedsburg $300,000. His donation was used to purchase 50 acres on the northeast side of town, which became the most used public area in the city, Nishan Park. The death of Edward Nishan brought an end to the 124-year legacy started by David Rudd in 1851 when he first moved to town. This legacy generated over $7.2 million in trust funds, buildings, and land that was given to Reedsburg and its citizens. This amount is in 2017 dollars when adjusted for inflation. Each year, the trust fund Frida established for the Reedsburg School District distributes $50,000 in educational scholarships to Reedsburg seniors. Nishan Park generates thousands of dollars of income and is used throughout the year for youth and adult activities. There are 2 plaques on the wall in City Hall. One acknowledges Frida's donation to the city of Reedsburg. Next to hers is one acknowledging the donation from Edward that was used to build Nishan Park. The Rudd Meyers Nishan legacy stands alone as what will likely remain the most generous endowment made to the citizens of Reedsburg.